We welcome very much all efforts for transnational cooperation at EU level. I mean, as our recent communication towards world-class clusters in the European Union, implementing the broad-based innovation strategy, has clearly outlined, is we need more world-class clusters in Europe. And transnational cluster cooperation at policy level, as well as at operational level between cluster organization, cluster initiatives, I think is one important way to bring competences together, more complementarities, more excellence at all levels. And this is what we very much support.
What is the Commission's strategy for the world-class clusters?
Yes.
I mean, is it a new way for the world economy, inter-cooperation between countries? Mm-hmm. What is the aim of that?
Well, first of all, I think in nowadays financial crisis and enhanced global competition, innovation is very key. And we see that clusters are a key drivers for innovation and growth. And the European Commission does not try to create European clusters as such, but what we try to foster is cluster cooperation and also the efforts at national as well as regional levels in support of clusters. And I think the Commission can play a supporting role there. For example, we have the European Cluster Observatory, where we provide cluster mapping, as well as in the future, more information about cluster initiatives. And I think there we can help for more evidence-based cluster policy, for example. But also at policy level, we have the European Cluster Alliance, bringing together 75 national, regional ministries, innovation agencies, etc. And they exchange their good practices, they have a mutual learning, and perhaps develop joint policies, because cluster policy is, and especially on a transnational level, is not an easy task. And cooperation has obstacles, but I think bringing the partners together, and especially if you have 75 partners, everybody has different objectives, but then you will find a group of people who want to work on one working areas, another group on one working areas. And we had just our first assembly on Friday at the Sophia Antipolis French Presidency Conference. And I think this is an important way. But also at an operational level, for example, we want to support more excellence at cluster organizations, because we see cluster organization as new and efficient forms of business and innovation support providers. I think they provide or channel business support, especially to SMEs which operate in clusters. And I think that's where our pilot initiative for the excellence of cluster organizations comes into hand, because there we try to develop training curricula for cluster managers, for example, which perhaps then, by developing quality standards on the basis of the EFQM, European Foundation for Quality Management, excellence model, we perhaps come up with a voluntary label for cluster organization, which then can help these cluster organizations to apply for more fundings, to use this to have more transparency for SMEs who may think about joining a cluster organization or not. And by this label, it gives them at least the recognition that they have trained their cluster managers and that they provide excellent services. I think these events, like this one today, as well as last week's the French Presidency Conference, these bring the key stakeholders together. And I think there the first connections are made between policymakers, between cluster managers, and perhaps you start with the first contact. You perhaps then think about starting a joint initiatives. Building trust takes time, and I think these events, bringing the key stakeholders together, are a very important start. And so we can make more transnational cooperation happen, so that at the end, hopefully, we have more world-class clusters in the EU.
Maybe
Brazil, India. This is also something in our forthcoming initiatives, for which we just had a call for proposals published last week for our Pro-Inno-Europe and our Europe Innova programs. Internationalization is a key aspect, because we know that a lot of cluster organizations, they try to develop internationalization strategies, but there was a study, for example, showing that only 10% do have a concrete internationalization plan. And this is where our initiatives try to promote this, and also the sharing of what can be a good internationalization strategy in terms of IPR support, in terms of SME support, etc. I think there are many different ways, and this process we want to facilitate. We want, as clusters are, clusters drive by competition. First of all, clusters are a market-driven process, but there is still a role for public policy to facilitate the process of cluster development. We have seen this in recent years where forward-looking cluster policies have made an effect on the cluster development in some regions. So therefore, I think there is a role for public policy, but clearly clusters are a market-driven phenomenon, but they can be supported.